November 22nd, 1963. Dallas, Texas, 12:30 in the afternoon. President John F. Kennedy sat in the back of a midnight blue Lincoln Continental. The vehicle moved at 11 miles per hour. The bubble-top roof had been removed, exposing the president to the Texas sun and 200,000 spectators lining the streets. Hidden in the buildings above, gunmen adjusted their scopes and stabilized their weapons. Beside the president sat Jackie Kennedy. She wore a bright pink Chanel suit and a matching pillbox hat. She rarely traveled on political tours with her husband. Today was the exception. The atmosphere was tense. Earlier that morning, local newspapers carried full-page black-bordered advertisements. The text labeled Kennedy a traitor. It accused him of being a secret communist. Dallas was a center of political hostility toward the administration. Extremists had distributed handbills with the president's face under the heading, "Wanted for treason." But on the street, the mood seemed different. The crowd cheered. People waved from balconies and sidewalks. The heat reached 70 degrees. Nellie Connolly, the First Lady of Texas, turned around from the front seat. She looked at Kennedy and said that Dallas surely loved him. The president smiled and nodded. Only 8 minutes remained. Why was the presidential limousine stripped of its protective glass? The security protocols were ignored. It seemed the president was safe among the fans. But the reality was a fatal security vacuum. How did the Secret Service miss the snipers in the windows? Why was the motorcade route published in the newspapers days in advance? Jackie Kennedy was about to witness a scene that would rewrite American history in seconds. The footage shows the motorcade turning onto Elm Street. Kennedy adjusted his tie. He waved to a child on the curb. The car passed the Texas School Book Depository. The sound of a bolt-action rifle cycled. The first shot rang out, echoing off the concrete buildings. The crowd did not scream yet. Many thought it was a motorcycle backfire or a firecracker. The president stopped waving. His hands reached for his throat. His body stiffened. Jackie Kennedy turned toward him, her face showing sudden confusion. This was the start of the end. The events of that day destroyed an era of American optimism. The investigation lasted decades, but the blood on the pink Chanel suit remained a permanent image of the 20th century. The motorcade accelerated toward Parkland Hospital. It was too late. The story of the 35th president concluded in a basement operating room. 12 hours and 30 minutes. At that exact moment, the motorcade turned toward Dealey Plaza. The presidential limousine made a slow left onto Houston Street. Then, it slid right onto Elm Street. The vehicle moved at 11 miles per hour. It followed a path rehearsed dozens of times. Everything looked normal under the bright November sun. The car passed the Texas School Book Depository. It was a 7-story red brick building dominating the corner. In the windows, employees leaned out to watch the motorcade. On the 6th floor, in the southeast corner window, the view was different. Someone had stacked boxes of books to create a sniper's nest. A rifle barrel rested on the ledge. 12 hours and 30 minutes. The first shot rang out. It missed the target entirely. The second shot followed seconds later. The bullet struck the upper back of the president. It exited through his neck and continued forward. The projectile then entered the body of Governor John Connolly. Kennedy reacted instantly. He raised both hands to his throat in a desperate reflex. His face contorted. He could not breathe. Jacqueline Kennedy turned toward her husband. Her face showed sudden confusion and shock. She reached for his arm. Then came the third shot. It struck the president's head. Abraham Zapruder stood on a concrete pedestal. The 58-year-old clothing manufacturer held an 8mm Bell & Howell camera. He watched the scene through the viewfinder. The footage shows the camera shaking, but Zapruder kept filming by instinct. His finger stayed locked on the trigger. He began to scream that they had killed him. Later, Zapruder described the impact. He saw the president's head explode like a firework. He knew immediately the wound was fatal. The limousine did not stop. Jacqueline Kennedy climbed out of her seat and onto the trunk of the moving car. She was reaching for fragments of her husband's skull. Later, she would have no memory of this action. A Secret Service agent ran from the car behind. He jumped onto the bumper, grabbed the First Lady, and shoved her back into the seat. The Lincoln accelerated. The driver floored the engine, heading for Parkland Memorial Hospital. On the radio, a reporter's voice broke into a scream. He reported a shooting. He shouted that Parkland Hospital must prepare for a severe gunshot wound. The car sped under the triple underpass, leaving the plaza behind. 26.6 seconds. That was the duration of the event. 486 frames of film recorded the trauma. It became the most documented assassination in human history. Yet, as the car disappeared, no one understood what had just happened. The era of American innocence was over. 12:58, Parkland Memorial Hospital, Trauma Room 1. Neurosurgeon. Kenneth Salyer sprinted through the corridors. He pushed past heavy swinging doors and dodged steel gurneys. The noise in the hallway was a wall of sound, shouting, footsteps, and the mechanical hum of equipment. He reached the room and stepped inside. The sight stopped him. John F. Kennedy lay on the table. A massive, jagged wound tore through the right side of his skull. Portions of bone and tissue were missing. It looked like the head had been shattered by a high-velocity impact. The president was still breathing. It was irregular, gasping, agonal. The medical team moved in a frantic, rehearsed rhythm. One doctor gripped the laryngoscope to intubate. Another performed an emergency tracheotomy. They pumped oxygen into his lungs and squeezed bags of blood into his veins. A needle drove adrenaline directly into the heart muscle, but the effort was hollow. Every doctor in the room saw the extent of the brain damage. The monitors showed a flatline approaching. At 1300 hours, the struggle ended. The president was declared dead. He was 46 years old. In the hospital corridor, Jacqueline Kennedy waited. She stood perfectly still. Her pink Chanel suit was saturated with dark, wet blood. She did not move. She did not cry. A staff member offered her a change of clothes. She refused. She wanted them to see what they had done to Jack. She remained in the blood-stained fabric as a living witness. 2 miles away, the focus shifted. Police units surrounded the Texas School Book Depository. They moved floor by floor. At 1345, officers reached the southeast corner of the 6th floor. They found a sniper's nest built from cardboard boxes. On the floor lay 3 spent brass shells. Nearby, hidden between stacks of books, was the weapon, an Italian Mannlicher Carcano bolt-action rifle. It was a 6.5 millimeter caliber with a mounted telescopic sight. The building manager performed a head count. One temporary employee was gone. He had left the building shortly after the shots. His name was Lee Harvey Oswald. The manhunt accelerated. 13:15, the Oak Cliff neighborhood. A patrol car pulled over. Events were moving faster than the radio could report. There was no turning back. 1:34 in the afternoon. 4 gunshots echo through the streets of Oak Cliff. Officer J.D. Tippett falls dead on the pavement. Witnesses see a man sprinting away, ducking between houses and disappearing into the neighborhood. 1:40 in the afternoon. The Texas Theater. It is a quiet, dark cinema in the center of the district. Police officers swarm the building. They act on reports of a suspicious man hiding in the shadows of the auditorium. They find Lee Harvey Oswald. They struggle. They detain him. 1 in the morning, November 23, 1963. The situation becomes official. Authorities formally charge Oswald with the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Detectives begin the interrogation. 12 hours of questioning follow. There are no recordings. There is no lawyer present. The sessions are intermittent, broken up by long intervals. Oswald sits in the chair and denies everything. He repeats the same phrase, he has nothing to do with the crime. His statements are a mess. Detectives note inconsistencies and contradictions. Some answers are documented as blatant lies. But who was the man behind the desk? Why did he end up in that room? At first glance, a loner, but in reality, a man who had spent years searching for a cause. October 18, 1939. Lee Harvey Oswald is born in New Orleans. His life begins with a void. His father died 2 months before the birth. Stability did not exist. By age 12, the pattern emerges. Oswald is arrested for truancy. He is sent to a youth detention center for observation. A psychiatrist examines him. The report describes a boy who is emotionally disturbed. The diagnosis points to a lack of family life. Movement was constant. He changed schools 12 times during his youth. he never stayed long enough to build a life. At 17, he looked for a structure. He joined the Marines. In 1959, Oswald receives his discharge from active duty. He does not wait. 9 days later, he boards a ship. His destination is the Soviet Union. He wants to start over in a communist system. He applied for Soviet citizenship. The authorities refused him. He settled in Minsk instead. He worked in a factory. He met Marina Nikolaevna Prusakova. They married. June 1962. Oswald returns to the United States. He brings a wife and a daughter. He is now a public Marxist and a defector. He stands on street corners. He hands out Fair Play for Cuba pamphlets. September 1963. Oswald travels to Mexico City. He visits the Soviet embassy. Then he visits the Cuban embassy. He wants visas to leave America again. Both embassies reject him. His language skills were a barrier. Witnesses say his Spanish and Russian were fragile. It was difficult to understand his speech. Intelligence reports later surfaced. Fidel Castro reportedly spoke to FBI informants about the visit. He claimed Oswald entered the Cuban embassy with a specific intent. He offered his services. The documents show Oswald was desperate for a role to play. October 1963. Lee Harvey Oswald was a man looking for a purpose. He found a job at the Texas School Book Depository in Dealey Plaza. He spent his days among stacks of textbooks, but his mind was elsewhere. November 22nd, 1963. Early morning. Oswald arrived at the building carrying a long, thin package wrapped in brown paper. A coworker asked what was inside. Oswald answered quickly, curtain rods for his apartment. Was it really just hardware? At first glance, an ordinary worker, but in reality, a sniper preparing his nest. The Warren Commission later confirmed the truth. The package didn't hold curtain rods. It contained a disassembled Mannlicher Carcano rifle. Oswald took the elevator up. He waited. Events accelerated. 3 shots changed history. November 25, 1963, Washington, D.C. A nation stopped. The footage shows a flag-draped casket leaving the White House. 6 gray horses pulled the caisson toward the Capitol building. The rhythm of the hooves on the pavement was the only sound. Beside the carriage walked a black horse with no rider. Empty boots were reversed in the stirrups. This is the riderless horse, an ancient military custom for a fallen leader. The camera captures the widow, Jacqueline Kennedy, walking behind the casket. She does not look away. 99 nations sent their leaders. It was the largest gathering of heads of state in history. Presidents, kings, and prime ministers stood on the same street. They marched in a slow, silent line. The sound of muffled drums filled the air. Millions of people sat in front of television sets. They watched the black and white broadcast in silence. There was no commentary, only the visual of the procession moving through the Capitol. The funeral ended at Arlington National Cemetery. An eternal flame was lit. The investigation began immediately, but the questions remained. Thus ended an era, 1:30 p.m., Central Standard Time. On the screen, Walter Cronkite removes his glasses. He looks at the clock on the wall. His voice breaks. The anchor struggles to find air as he delivers the sentence. John F. Kennedy is dead. The announcement lasted only seconds, but the silence that followed felt eternal. How did the nation react? People stopped in the middle of the streets. They leaned against walls. They put their heads in their hands and wept. In New York, the traffic froze. In Washington, the offices emptied. Arlington National Cemetery. The date is November 25, 1963. The coffin sits on a green hillside below Arlington House. Soldiers stand at attention. The sound of muffled drums fills the air. It is a burial with full military honors. A torch is brought forward. Jacqueline Kennedy takes the flame and ignites the base. The fire catches. This eternal flame is now the official marker for the grave. It is a physical signal to the world. The president is gone, but the memory remains. Standing nearby is John Jr. The president's son is wearing a blue coat. He is exactly 1 day away from his 3rd birthday. As the cake show passes, the boy steps forward. He raises his small hand to his forehead. He salutes his father. The camera captures the moment. It is a static, painful image. The footage became a permanent part of the American record. But the events in Dallas were not over. Blood had been spilled, but the investigation was just beginning. More details emerged within hours. The police moved fast. The city was in chaos. There was no turning back. Events accelerated. The story of the assassination continues to unfold with new evidence. The archives remain open. The facts are still being analyzed. Thus ended the first chapter of a national tragedy. November 24th, 1963. 11:21 in the morning. Dallas Police Headquarters. Detectives Jim Lavelle and L.C. Graves gripped Lee Harvey Oswald by the arms. They moved toward the basement ramp. The plan was a transfer to the county jail. It was a more secure facility with isolated cells and high walls. Reporters crowded the narrow hallway. Camera crews hoisted heavy equipment onto their shoulders. Flashbulbs popped in rapid succession. The light bounced off the concrete walls like artificial lightning. The footage shows the moment Oswald entered the main area. The noise from the press was constant. Suddenly, a man stepped from the front row. Jack Ruby moved fast. His hand reached into his pocket and pulled out a .38 caliber revolver. He lunged forward. One shot rang out. The bullet hit Oswald in the abdomen. This happened on live television. Millions of Americans saw it in their living rooms. Later, the Guinness World Records added a new entry. This was the first known human murder broadcast live on TV. UPI reporter Terrence McGarry stood 3 meters away. He saw a brown blur move across his field of vision. 1 second later, the scene turned into a brawl. Detectives tackled the shooter. Others grabbed Oswald as he collapsed. Jack Ruby shouted. He called Oswald a rat and a son of a bitch. He yelled that Oswald had killed his president. The footage records the aftermath. Officers lifted Oswald onto a stretcher. His shirt was torn open. His face was contorted. A single, small blue hole was visible just below his ribcage on the left side. An ambulance raced to Parkland Memorial Hospital. Medics wheeled Oswald into Trauma Room 1. It was the same emergency room where John F. Kennedy had died 48 hours earlier. Doctors worked for nearly 2 hours. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Lee Harvey Oswald was declared dead. There would be no trial. No testimony was ever recorded. The man accused of killing the president would never answer the questions the world was asking. The case remained open.